Hey everybody, this is the Atlas lathe part number 34, and this video was supposed to open with the completion of the bracket for the lead screw on the Atlas lathe. I had pretty much wrapped it up in 33. I had one more thing I wanted to do that I ended up doing, which was I actually cut a flat on the corner and drilled a hole for oiling. And what ended up happening was I inadvertently had it in the vise the wrong way. So what ended up happening was I milled the flat, and then when I went back over to and I drilled the hole, and then when I went back over to the bench to use my punches and punch the word oil in, I wanted to make sure I didn't put the word oil upside down, so I was making sure I had it oriented the right way, and that's when I realized that I had milled the flat side on the wrong corner. So when the part was on the lathe, the flat side was facing down, which wouldn't be very good for oiling. So I ended up having to mill another flat side where it was supposed to be, and what I did was I tapped that hole that was on the wrong side and just screwed a screw in there with a little bit of sealant on it. So it's kind of, silly that screw doesn't belong there. And you'll see later on in this video when I show the lead screw, you'll be able to see the completed part, and you'll notice that there's a little Allen head screw that doesn't belong there, a little cap screw, basically to cover up one of my mistakes. And so that's basically all that you missed. And then the next thing I did was where this video picks up is I started working on doing something with the change gears, because the change gears were kind of loose and wobbly, and I didn't like that, so I wanted to address that. And so without further ado, let's dive right into that. Well, I was putting this back together and getting ready to put the gears on and test out my lead screw, and I remembered that I didn't like how this gear wobbles. And I had noticed that somebody, possibly the previous owner, the gentleman I knew before he passed away, made a aluminum spacer right here. And he actually even took the time to cut it so that it's got a slot for the woodruff key. So that spacer should do the job, taking that wiggle out. The problem is he made it just a hair too small. So what's happening is this washer is bottoming out on the shaft. So this washer is actually not being able to push that aluminum washer up against there. So the trick is, I want a washer that's going to go in there that has to have an ID large enough to go over this shaft. So take this off. So basically I want a washer that has the same a hole in it the same size as this. And then of course the other problem is that it's not going to want to sit in position. But I figured it's such a thin washer that I could probably put it on the back side here. That'll have the effect of moving this gear out probably, a negligible amount. In other words, if this washer right here were just a tiny bit thicker, it would effectively do the same thing as what I'm attempting to do here. So I got room behind this woodruff key. I could take the woodruff key out and I could make a washer and stick it in there. So I'm going to put a really thin washer in there. So I'm going to have to find a washer with a hole this big, which I doubt I'll have, so I'll modify one. Alright, so this is one of the thinnest washers I have. This is a fender washer by the looks of it. And so what I want to do is I want to make a 3/4 inch hole in this washer. Now There's a couple of ways I could go about doing this. I was going to mount it here in the lathe, the chuck, and then use my tailstock and just drill the hole. Simple enough, except in order to mount this washer in the chuck, I'm going to have to remove all the jaws and reverse them so that I can hold it like this, basically, which probably would work, but I really don't feel like going through the trouble of swapping all the jaws around. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to mount it in a drill press vise and do it on the milling machine. The reason why I said I was going to use the drill press vise is because my little drill press vise has a little slot in it, or a groove in it, which makes it really handy for holding thin washers and things like that. But I decided that just by sitting it on top of parallels here, I think it's going to be okay, because I'm not going to be putting that much cutting force on it. It's so thin. So the next question is, well, how am I going to locate it? Well, I just found myself a piece of metal stock or shaft or whatever this is. It's actually, I think it's a homemade center punch, and that's got the ID that's almost exactly the same as what's in there now. And I just moved my X and Y axis until that just goes in there nice and easy. I can just see that it's just slightly. Again, this isn't so critical. If my hole isn't exactly in the center, it's not going to cause this thing to run out of balance or anything. It's not going to be moving anywhere near that fast. Alright, so now I gotta find myself a drill bit. That's the problem, is I don't want to tighten the vise too much, because then let's actually lift it up. Don't want to tighten the vise too much, because then I'm bending the washer. If I cut through the other side now. Well, of course, I just messed up my location now, right? Which I can fudge it. Oops. Yeah, that washer's just too thin. I guess I should have done that on the lathe. Not flat anymore. I think I can still save this. Alright, so I'm not going to notch this washer out for the Woodruff key, because there's a space behind the Woodruff key that I can have the washer ride in. So I'm just going to pop the key out. Slide my washer on. Put the key back in. Put this spacer back on. Put my gear back on. Put the aluminum spacer over at the table. Put the aluminum spacer back on. Then the original washer. And now when I tighten this up.
Breakfast is ready.
Alright, thanks. So now that slop in that gear is completely gone, which should help this drivetrain on this lathe run a little bit quieter. Although these other ones are probably gonna still be kind of loose, and I don't think I'm gonna bother rebushing them. I'm gonna leave that up to the next owner. Time for breakfast.
Well, guys, I'm going to rig up the change gears here, and I want to set this up for a feed that's going to be fairly common. And on the lathe, of course, we've got this chart over here, and it's a thread chart. But then at the very bottom, there's a small section that says feed per revolution of spindle. They only give you two choices, 0.0087 inches per revolution, which is really fine feed, and then 0.0055 inches per revolution, which is kind of, I would say, more like a medium feed. Not very coarse, but then again, this isn't a very robust lathe, so maybe that's why. So I'm going to set it up, the 0087 just seems to me like, oh, I got those backwards. The 0.0055 is the finer feed. I think about that, yeah, so it's going to move, it's only going to move 5.5 thousandths per revolution, as opposed to 8.7 thousandths, or 0.0087 inches per revolution. So I guess I'll try the 0087. So that's going to be a coarser feed. So according to this, that means I need the 96-inch gear, 96-tooth gear, which I already have on my lead screw. And we need a 20-tooth gear and a 96-tooth gear stacked on the idler stud in position C. And then the 32 and 64 inch, 32 and 64 tooth gears stacked in position A of the compound. All right, 20 and 96. That's going to be here. Nope, here. Well, all right, so I got the stud in the position that it's supposed to be in. So obvious to me that if I'm going to put a 96 tooth gear on there, it's going to have to go behind here. And so that must mean that the 20 tooth, the small one, sits up front here. So this gear on the lead screw is going to mesh with the 20 tooth. So this gear is going to be driven by the gear on the stud above it. All right, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this in there. I think it's just going to be easier to pop this gear off. Be interesting to see whether or not I go through the trouble of doing this, only to find out that I have to take these gears off to get to the ones behind it. Huh. Well, that's interesting. That looks like that gear might... No, I guess not. I thought that was going to interfere with... It seems like that could use a washer in there too. That's awfully sloppy. That is rubbing. 96 tooth gear is rubbing on my little washer that I made stuck in here, of all things. Oh, I can't believe it's that close. All right, so I just took that washer over to the grinder, the pedestal grinder, and just ground along the outside of it to change the OD. It wasn't going to be worth it for me to set something up in the lathe just to cut that down. I was just realizing that when I put this together, there's really no provision to oil this properly, because when you put that end washer on here, it kind of covers up the shaft. There's no hole in the gear. So I decided I put a little light film of grease on this bushing here that this rides on. Yeah. I don't want it running dry, I know that. I figure if I put oil on there, it's not going to stay long. won't work its way out, so I'm going with grease. What is that rubbing now? Are you kidding me? It's still rubbing that same. I think that's going to rub that washer behind it, even if that other washer wasn't there. What if there's a spacer that's supposed to go behind here that's missing? This washer clearly went on the outside of this. As did this washer went on the outside of this. Doesn't look like it. Weird. Oh, why do I appear to be missing a whole nother stud? Oh no, it's right here. I guess it is just that close. The back side of this gear, the 96 tooth gear, is scraping this huge spacer. So there's got to be something to keep this out a little further. Yeah, can hear it rubbing. This can't go any further over in this slot this way. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a washer, thin washer that I can stick behind there that will fit on this. Well, I tried to see if I could get this gear to stop wobbling, and it's not going to happen. I tried putting a washer on the back. Actually, if I put a washer on the back of this, backside of this, it's not going to do anything. I've got a washer on there now. That just moves the whole gear pairing out, but that doesn't stop the wobble. And then I tried putting a washer here up against this wall behind there. The problem with that is this washer, the thickness of this washer, as soon as I tighten this down, then this doesn't spin freely anymore because it revolves on this. So I thought, well, maybe if this was a little bit shorter, I could shorten this and that might take it up. But then I realized that actually it doesn't appear to be that the play is so much related to the length of this as it is the actual ID of this is worn on these things so that it wobbles. This one's not as bad. This one's more worn, so that's why this whole gear can do this. So if I take this nut off, you can actually see it. Of course, taking this nut off loosens the whole bolt, so it's kind of hard to appreciate it, but if I move this back and forth, you can actually see there's a lot of play in there. So I'm just gonna have to roll with that the way it is, and hopefully it's gonna be okay once I have it meshing with the other gear. And then of course I gotta set the clearance between these two gears, and just a wonderful Zamek. Come on, stay up there, you piece of crap. Alright, well, let me get the other one on there. And let's see. So, looks like it's 32 and 64. Alright, so 32 and a 64 in position A. Up over here. Which one's stacked on which? Okay, that's gotta... Hold on. Well, that can't work. Oh, I see. Hold on. It's like a puzzle. This can't go behind this gear, so... Oh, wait a minute. If this was on the outside here like this goes here. There we go. This goes up here like this. Oh, what are we missing? A washer? Looks like it. I think this is supposed to go like this. There we go. Like that. I gotta find this washer. Take these off so they don't fall off and break. Ooh.
What I did was I knocked off a corner to give a flat side, and I don't like this at all. Take two. Yeah. Take three.